Welcome everyone to Level Up Your DevOps with GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. I'm so excited to be here at DevOps Pro Europe. Let's dig in. Let me share my screen. This is going to be so cool. I'm really excited to be able to help build a DevOps pipeline here in GitHub Actions. Now, here's the part where I pull up my slides, but there are no slides. This is it. Let's take a look at the code. It is online right now. Here's github.com, Rob Rich, Level Up DevOps with GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. Let me put it in the chat as well. Now, the interesting thing is it is empty right now. Now, that's perfectly fine. Let's go build it. I've checked out an empty directory here, and we can see that it's empty right here. Our first stop is to scaffold out a website. So let's do that. .NET new MVC, name is Level Up DevOps, output to the current folder. Now, the cool thing about this is it will build up a website that does all the things. We'll have controllers and actions and, and I need another dash here. There we go. Now we've got a website getting built up. Perfect. So we have this website, and here in this website, we have controllers, we have views. And so let's change it from hello, welcome to DevOps Pro Europe. Now that we've got a website ready to go, our goal is to be able to build up a DevOps pipeline that will run this inside of a container. So we are going to need a .gitignore to be able to commit this to source control. Gitignore. Nah, let's not put in these assets yet. Okay, so now here in the gitignore, we need to ignore all of the files that we will build, or files that will, libraries that will download. So bin, obj, star.user.vs. Those are all the files that we don't want to commit to source control. That's perfect. Now, as we step into a container, we'll create a similar .dockerignore file. Let's go create that, .dockerignore. Now, here in the dockerignore file is everything that we don't want to end up in our container. So, well, it'll be the same. We also probably don't want the .git folder and the .gitignore file and the .dockerignore file. We might be getting a little bit redundant here, but one of the things that we definitely don't want here is the appsettings.development.json. appsettings.development.json. That file will, that's development details that we don't want in our production app. Same thing here, this launch settings.json. That file also is development details that we don't need to push into our production container. Now, this is everything that will never end up in our container. That's perfect. Now we need a Docker file. Let's create a Docker file. Docker file. Now, it's important that this is named Docker file and not dockerfile.txt. If you accidentally named it dockerfile.txt, rename, take off the .txt, and now we're good. We want to, we want to start off on the shoulders of giants. So let's head off to Docker Hub and see which image will get us where we need to go. Here we go. Here is Docker Hub, and we can search for .NET, and we'll land here on this page that talks about the .NET repositories. .NET SDK, ASP.NET, runtime, monitor, samples. Samples is great for seeing lots of different kinds of Docker files that build in different ways. Now, in this case, SDK is what we're after. We're after the build tools. So let's pop open this page. Hey, I'm not logged into Docker. You're right. Okay, so here's that spot that we need. We need this image name. Now let's cruise down a little bit and we can see some of the tags that are available. Now here's that 5.0 or latest that runs on Debian. Ooh, here's one that runs on Alpine. So 5.0-Alpine will actually make our image a lot smaller. Alpine is a much smaller Docker base image, a much smaller Linux environment. So let's do this, and we'll say Alpine. Now we've got our base image. We have the .NET build tools. Now we do need to copy all of our content from our local machine into our container. So this is the directory where we'll run the Docker build command, and this is the directory inside of our container where we'll build out the content. Well, where is that directory? workdir/src. Now, there's nothing magic about that .src or /src directory. I think that's kind of a nice spot to put it. We could also put it in varlib, wherever we wanted it to be. Now we need to run some commands to build up our system. So let's say .NET restore, .NET build, we want to build in release mode. .NET test, we'll also run our tests in release mode. .NET publish, we'll publish in release mode to the dist folder. Now these are all of the command line tasks that we need to run to get our site from source code into built content. Now in our Docker file, we need to run them. So let's run this one, and we'll run this one, and we'll run this one, and we'll run this one. And now that we've run those commands here in our Docker container, now we have that built content in the dist folder. Let's change our workdir to /dist. And we will run the command that will start up. We'll say .NET level devops.dll. And I need a U there. Okay, so that's the command that will start up as our container starts. The rest of these are all of the tasks that we'll do at build time to build up this image. Now we do need a few environment variables that'll help us to tell ASP.NET what URL to start up on, run in production mode. We'll tell Docker to expose port 80. And so now we've got a container that's ready to go. Now this container is great. We could push this into production right now, but there are some things that we can tidy up right here. Right now we have our build tools and our source code in our production container. Now probably we want to separate these out so that we only end up with these built assets. Now we could say right here, run rm-rf/src star.cs. That actually wouldn't delete the content because each of these commands creates a layer. So the content would still be there. Our image would still be larger. So let's instead head back out to Docker Hub. And last time we chose the SDK, let's run the ASP.NET runtime here. Now this ASP.NET runtime doesn't include the build tools. It only includes the pieces that we need to be able to run a website. Let's copy that. We're using .NET 5.0. And scrolling down to the tags, we can see that we also have an Alpine variant of this image as well. So let's separate this here from their -Alpine. Now we have two different images. I'm going to say this one is the build server image, misusing the term server, and this is the run production server image. We now have two different images that this build will create. One that is our build tools, our build server that has the build tools, and one that is our production runtime. Well, let's change this from workdir to app, and now we need to copy our content. We want to copy the dist folder into the current directory. But we don't want to copy it from our local machine like we did here. Instead, we want to copy it --from equals build. Well, where do we get that build label? Let's label this one as build. Now, we could call it anything. There's nothing magic about build. We could also label this one, but we won't use that label. So this works. We now have a production image and a build image. Our source code never gets into this one, only that content from the dist folder. There's one more thing that we can tidy up. Right here, we're .NET restoring all of our NuGet packages, all of our libraries, all of our dependencies. And here we're copying in all the source code from our local machine. So if I were to change a CSS file or a JavaScript file, I would then restore all of my NuGet packages. That can be kind of time consuming. Really, I want to do this. I want to restore the packages first and then copy everything. Well, I still need to tell it what packages it needs to restore. So let's copy level up devops.csproj into the current folder. Now I have the details that I need to restore. Then I can copy all the rest of my source code, build, test, and release it. That's perfect. We now have a Docker file that will build up two images. One is the build image, which we'll just throw away. And the other is the production image, which is the one that we'll tag as we run our Docker build command. Next, we need to go grab some details for our Kubernetes. So I'm just going to reach into my stash and go grab the thing that I did last time. So let's go grab this Kubernetes YAML file. And this Kubernetes YAML file has the details for a deployment. It has the details for a service. It also has the details for an ingress. And we do have some placeholders here where we can replace them at build time with the secrets to keep those secrets out of source control. Now I have an AKS URL, my runtime URL. I have an ACR URL, my registry URL. I have image label, the label of my image. What is the version tag that I need to? And I have those in various places. We also have last time. Well, it's not last time. Let's swap this out with level up DevOps. And let me go double check that that's the right one. Yep. And we're good to go. So now that I've got my deployment and service and ingress defined here in my Kubernetes YAML file, we're ready to commit. So let's come here into the source control tab. We can take a look at each of the files. We can diff it together with what it was and what it will be. In this case, they're all new, so that's perfect. Let's stage all of the things, and we will commit it. Level up your DevOps. Okay, let's commit that. Git status. Okay, git push origin main, and we will send that up to GitHub. Okay, now we have our code up on GitHub. So switching back here to our GitHub repository, we can see that we now have content. Now this Git repository was empty almost. I did pre-set up some secrets here. I came in here to settings and I went to secrets, and I did define some secrets here. My ACR password, ACR URL, ACR username, AKS URL, and kubeconfig. We'll be able to use these secrets as we build up this DevOps pipeline. And so basically I just went in and I said new secret, and I filled in the name and value, and now I have these secrets. Okay, so next we want to go build up a DevOps pipeline. I'm going to click here on Actions, and I'll be able to get to the spot where I can build up a DevOps pipeline. Okay, so we could flip through here and look at all kinds of different mechanisms. Rust, Ruby, Pylint. There's some more. These are all templates. And so I could definitely start from an empty template if I wanted to, but I could also start from one of these that gets us started easier. Ooh, here's a .NET one. That's interesting. But I'm starting with a Docker container. So let's start with this Docker image one. Now there is, it's going to guess. It guessed that my site was a Jekyll site, and that is incorrect. So let's go find the Docker image again, and Docker image. There we go. Let's set up this workflow. Now it's just scaffolding out this piece here in the designer. I'm going to change this from Docker image to Docker Kubernetes. I'm going to call this Docker build and push Kubernetes apply. Okay, so let's do the steps that we need to do this. Now, I do want to run on the main branch, but let's do pull requests differently. We don't want to do that. Now, running on Ubuntu latest, that sounds perfect. Here's the steps then that we'll do. First step is to check out all of the code. We've got all of our code now. All of the Git content is ready to go. And now we'll do build and push Docker Kubernetes apply. So I'm going to do a multi-step build here. It's doing a Docker build. We don't need to pass in the -f because we already know that it is Docker file. We can tag it. I'm going to move the dot over here. Now we could tag it with the date. Let's set this instead to level up DevOps. Now I want to use my repository URL, my ACR URL here. Now I have a secret defined that way. How do we use the secrets here? Well, I come here into the docs and it shows me, hey, go create the secrets. That looks good. These secrets are encrypted, and I can use this syntax with the $curly to be able to get at that content. Okay, so now that I can see how to use those secrets, let's come in here and I want to use that secret there. And let's use here, instead of the date, I will use github.sha, the GitHub, the Git hash. Now that's really cool in that I now have a unique label that identifies the source code that came from this content. So I'm building this one, and it will go do all of the build steps that I've identified here in my Docker file. And then now I need to push it. Okay, so let's Docker push, and let's go grab this tag, and I will push that up to my container registry. Now, to be able to push this to my container registry, I first need to, well, log into my container registry. Let's come to the marketplace and look for a mechanism to log in. Okay, so I'm going to say Docker login. Ooh, Docker login. Let's do that. I want to take a look at this task and how it works. Now, I can definitely go to the full marketplace listing. That will get me to the source code that builds this action. Let me look at the YAML that I'll need. Yeah, that looks great. I'll copy this YAML and I'll set it in place right here. Now, I do need to indent it correctly. There we go. So I've got this Docker login action. Now, the first thing that I need is the registry. Okay, I've got a secret for the registry. I can use secrets.acr URL. Now I need a username. Okay, I know what that username is. Let's go grab secrets.acr username. My password. Okay, I have a secret for that as well. Let's put secrets.acr password. Log out? Yeah, sure. Let's log out. The default is true, and I will say that I will do that as well. Now that won't log out as soon as this task finishes, but it will log out as soon as the build finishes. Great. So now that I'm logged into Docker, when I do a Docker push to that registry, then everything will work great. Now, next thing, I need to do a kubectl apply, and I'll give it the file k8s.yaml. And that will apply these details to my Kubernetes repository or my Kubernetes cluster. Now, to be able to apply this to my Kubernetes cluster, I first need to log into Kubernetes. Let's come back here to the marketplace and let's search for Kubernetes Set Context. Set Context. Kubernetes Set Context. That one looks good. Now I could dig into the full marketplace listing again, learn about how this one works, but let's just go grab the YAML. Okay, I'm going to grab the YAML, set it in place right here, indent it correctly. Now we've got the Kubernetes set context. Ooh, this one is not the one that I expected. Let's come back here and look at this one, Kubernetes set context. Yeah, that's the one that I'm after. Let's delete this one and paste that one, indent it correctly. There we go. This one allows me to set based on a Kubernetes a kube config, where the other one I could only use username and password. So the default is kube config. Let's do that. Here's kube config. So now I don't need secret or URL or context. And so now let's go specify that kube config. Well, I have a secret for that. Secrets.kubeconfig. And that gets me logged into Kubernetes. Now that I'm logged into Kubernetes, when I do a kubectl apply, then that content will come into place. Now, I do have some secrets here in my Kubernetes YAML file that I need to replace. Like, for example, the AKS URL, the ACR URL, and my image label. Okay, let's come back in here to GitHub Actions, and let's go grab this sed command. Now, this sed command is a little hairy, so I'll just copy and paste it into place, save us typing a little bit. Now, this one will not back up things. It will replace this command with the actual secret, and we're doing it globally, so it will do it multiple times if it needs to. AKS URL with AKS URL, image label with the GitHub SHA, and all of that into the K8s YAML file. Now, I'm doing this after I do a Docker push, so that the secrets don't accidentally end up in my tag. Say, for example, if I came in here and in my Docker ignore file, I forgot to say, where's my Docker ignore file? If I forgot to say ignore k8s.yaml, then my secrets don't end up embedded inside my container. That's good. So I've got my secrets in place. I'm going to do the kubectl apply. We'll build, we'll push, replace secrets, and apply it to the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so now let's start commit. Add build file. Commit. Now, the cool part about this is that just becomes one of the files in my repository. If I switch back to my command line here, I can say git pull, and it will, and it's just one of the files here in my repository. I have a .github folder. Inside there, I have a workflows folder, and inside there, I have this file. Now I can modify it here inside of VS Code, or I could modify it in the GitHub experience as well. Now that I have this file, though, it knows that there is a build. So if I come in here to GitHub Actions, oh, it looks like it already failed. Why did it fail? Startup failure. Jobs. Tell me about the failure. Rerun jobs. The workflow is not valid. Unrecognized value ACR URL. Line 32. Okay, so let's come in here to line 32. ACR URL. I'm not seeing what it doesn't like. So let me actually go replace this with this. Let's see if we've got some diffs in our source code. Yes, I forgot the secrets beforehand. Fix typo. Let's stage this and commit it. Git push origin main. Glad we have a build to go validate these details. Perfect. So now here, because we have a file inside .github/workflows, it was able to kick off a build. Let's go into our build details and see how this build is doing. Now, we'll get to see all of the steps that this build will do. It will start off by logging into our Docker container registry. Then it will log into our Kubernetes cluster. Then it will be able to do those build steps where it pops open the Docker file and does all of the steps inside Docker. It looks like we're waiting for a build agent. Oh, there we go. So it did the Docker login, the Kubernetes set context, Docker build, push, and apply actually failed. Let's take a look at why it failed. Why did it fail? Could not execute because the file was not found. Oh, .NET public. That's not the command here. Let's come back in here and look at our Docker file. It's not .NET public, it's .NET publish. Typos are the thing today. Okay, let's stage this. Fix typo. Git push origin main. Now, the cool part is the moment that we push that content is the moment that it triggers a new build. Let's come to this build and see how this is working. Okay, so let me get back to that build, setup job. There we go. We're doing a Docker login, a Kubernetes apply, and now we're doing all of the steps inside of our build file. Pulling the base image. Once we've got that base image created, now we're going to copy in all of our content. We'll do a .NET build, a .NET. Let's see if our build works. Yep, our build succeeded. Let's run all of our tests. There aren't any tests have passed. .NET publish. So we're publishing that content and ultimately finishing up this container. That's great. Now we're pushing it up to our container registry. So let's push up each of the layers. It looks like that some of the layers are ready to go. And then we'll, as we leave this, we'll unlog into Docker. And ultimately, then we will Kubernetes apply that content. And if we come back here into Kubernetes, we can say kubectl get all, and we will see this content here running in Kubernetes. That's cool. We got from nothing to a site running in a container on Kubernetes. Now, it will take some time to propagate this, not this one. Here in our Kubernetes YAML file, we've specified an ingress controller and the URL that it'll take to get there. Now, it will take some time to propagate the DNS for this URL. So to avoid that, we can jump in and proxy to a particular resource. So we can port forward to a particular pod, or to all the pods, or to a deployment, or to a service. Ooh, let's do that. Let's kubectl port forward into the service. Kubectl port forward service / level up DevOps. We'll go from 80 to 80. Well, maybe something is already running on port 80 on my local machine. So I'll go to from 80. Okay. Now that we've got that port forward in place, then we can come here to localhost 8080. And we've got our website running inside of Kubernetes. That is great. Now, how do we do things like a pull request build? We kind of skipped that early on. Well, here inside Docker, inside our workflows folder, we can copy this file and let's paste it again. And let's call this one Docker pull request. Now here, we don't want to do a push. We don't want to do a Kubernetes apply. We want to do it on all of the branches that are not main. And we want to do pull requests. And we'll do this on all branches. So if you do a pull request on any branch, I'm going to kick off this build. Not quite sure why it's squiggly here. Why? Oh, okay. So here in our Kubernetes, or in our GitHub Actions build, we don't need to kubectl apply. We don't want to run it, which means we also don't need to set in all of the secrets, which means that we don't need to log into Kubernetes. We also don't want to push this into our container registry. And so we don't need to do a Docker login. We probably also don't need to tag it with our registry. So let's say level up DevOps -PR. And now we have a tag. Now we'll validate all of the steps of our Docker file. We'll build, we'll run all of our tests, we'll create the image, but we won't actually push it anywhere. So let's just say Docker build a PR. Let's also add a README file here. New file, readme.md. And let's go grab some content here for this README file. Here's level up DevOps with GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. Wouldn't it be cool if we could put a status badge here? Let's come back into GitHub Actions and we will say, hey, I would like to go create a status badge for this. Let's copy the status badge markdown and set it in place right here. That looks great. Okay, so let's commit some content. We commit this README. Let's commit this new build for a PR. Oh, yeah. Let's ignore our Kubernetes YAML file correctly. Okay, so add PR build and README. Let's commit that. And git push origin main. Now we're pushing to the main branch. We're not pushing to a different branch. So because we're pushing to the main branch, when we add this content, it will automatically kick off a build. Now we can see that build content right here. We could click into the details there, or we could click in here to actions to take a look at our build. Here's our build history. Yeah, it took us a little bit to do that. But now that we've got this, here's our build, and we can take a look at all of the steps. Now, it is running the main build. It's not running the PR build because, well, it doesn't apply to the main branch. So here's all of the steps that it's doing. It's rebuilding our website. It's running all of our unit tests. It's doing a .NET publish, getting all the content, copying it into that new container. And then once it's got that new container, then it's pushing that container up to our container registry. All of those steps inside of our Docker file. Once it's done with that Docker file, it's finishing up all of the steps in the build, doing the push it up to the container registry, set out all of those secrets in our Kubernetes YAML file, and ultimately pushing that up to our website. So now if we come back in here to our source code, we can see that we have those two workflow files for PRs and for regular builds. And we can see that we now have a README file that has this nice tag. And so that's really cool to be able to get that in place. Now, what if we want to do a build for another environment? Well, we could definitely take this same approach where we said, let's clone this file. We could copy this file and we could create a new file and nope, not that. Let's copy this file, and we can paste it here. Now this one, we only want to go on the develop branch. And now instead of the ACR URL, we could use the develop ACR URL, and we could do this one, or we could take a different approach. Let's say that this build works for the main branch and the develop branch. Now, is it going to use the production secrets? Well, it could, or we can come in here to GitHub Actions, and in our GitHub repository, in here in our secrets, we can create environment-specific secrets. Now, in this case, all of our secrets are global, but we could create an environment that maps to the develop branch. And inside the develop branch, we specify the container registry for develop and the Kubernetes context for develop. So we'll redefine each of these 5 variables specific to the develop branch. To that end, we probably need to move these 5 variables to the main branch. Now that we have that content in place, we can use this one Docker file to be able to build and deploy for both our develop branch going to our dev environment and also our main branch going to our production environment. That's probably a safer move. So let's back out of this process and we'll not commit that file. So now we have a single build that works for both production and pre-production environment using the secrets specific to that environment. And that'll do the exact same process of building it, pushing the content to our container registry, and applying that in our Kubernetes cluster. Now, this was a lot of fun getting to build up this DevOps pipeline. We were able to, from start, build up this repository, and we now have all of this code that is online for you to use right now. I would invite you to fork this repository and use this mechanism in your workflows to be able to automatically build and deploy containers in a really elegant way. If you're watching this talk later, hit me up on Rob Rich at Twitter, on Twitter at Rob_Rich. You can grab the code right here at github.com/RobRich/levelupDevOps GitHub Actions Kubernetes. For those of you who are here live at the conference, what are your questions? Let me set this in chat. One of the questions that I often get is, how do I do this to my cloud? You know, in this case, I was doing this to Azure, but can I do this to AWS or to GCP? What's interesting about this solution is nothing in here specified Azure in particular. Now, I was using Azure Container Registry and Azure Kubernetes Service, but it was just a secret. Similarly, here in my Docker file, there's nothing that's specific to Azure or to any specific cloud. So if I were to swap in my GCP URL, now I'm pushing to Google Cloud. Or if I do the AWS URL, then I'm pushing to AWS. Or to that end, I could just say registry URL, and now it's completely cloud agnostic. There's nothing specific here to a particular cloud. Or if I even wanted to run this on my private cloud, running either from GitHub Enterprise within my organization or on GitHub hosted and push to my local registry, my on-prem registry and on-prem Kubernetes cluster, I could as well. There's nothing specific to a particular cloud here. Another question I often get is, how do I rig this up for my other branches? We looked at how we could create secrets for each environment and create a build file specific for each environment. we can identify here at the top of the build file what branches that we want to target. So in this case, we're targeting the main and develop branches. We could target slash release slash star, and that would go grab all of them. And we also saw in the PR how we wanted to not do main. We'll probably also want to not do main or not do main and not develop. I believe that's the right syntax. And here we can say, I would like to grab all branches. Oh, that's what I forgot. And that's why it's mad. Branches. There we go. So now that we've got this in place and we're specifying the branches that we want to include or exclude, then we've got a PR ready to go. Let me save that and save that. And let's push that up to, we've got that build change. Oh, yeah, let's definitely not do that. Let's stage this though. Stage selected ranges. Okay. And I'll do that off. Nope, let's actually do this. Add develop branch. And we will commit that. Commit stage changes. Oh, yes. It really doesn't want ACR URL. There we go. Now it'll let it go. Very nice. Commit. And let me push this. Git push origin main. There, now we have all of the code, including the develop branches too. Well, this was a lot of fun getting to show you building up a DevOps pipeline in GitHub Actions with containers. I would invite you to leverage this in your builds. And if you have any questions or concerns or comments, anything that I missed or anything you want to share, tweet me at Rob_Rich. Thanks for joining us today. You're welcome, Takumi. Thank you for joining us.